At my wedding anniversary dinner, my father-in-law smiled and asked, "I'm glad you're enjoying the apartment I bought you." I whispered, "We live in a rented basement." My mother-in-law dropped her fork. The room fell silent as the truth surfaced. I should have known that night would change everything. 5 years of marriage, and Daniel thought we were living in some beautiful apartment he'd been funding. Instead, Marcus and I had been crammed into a basement rental that smelled like mildew and had water stains creeping across the ceiling. The restaurant was one of those places where the silverware is heavy and the waiters wear white gloves. Helen had insisted on celebrating our anniversary there, even though I'd suggested somewhere more casual. I felt out of place in my discount dress, watching Marcus charm his parents with stories about his demanding clients and exciting projects. "So, Rebecca," Daniel said, cutting into his steak with precision, "how are you enjoying the apartment? The building management treating you well?" I looked up from my pasta, confused. "I'm sorry?" "The apartment." He smiled warmly. "The one on Riverside Drive. I know the building's older, but the location is unbeatable." My stomach dropped. I glanced at Marcus, whose face had gone completely still. Not surprised, not confused, just frozen, like someone trying very hard not to react. "Daniel," I said carefully, setting down my fork, "we don't live on Riverside Drive." Helen leaned forward, her pearl necklace catching the candlelight. "What do you mean, dear?" "We live in a basement rental, on Foster Street." The words felt strange in my mouth, like I was confessing to something shameful. "We've lived there since we got married." The fork slipped from Helen's hand and clattered against her plate. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Other diners turned to look, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from Daniel's face as it shifted from confusion to something harder. "That's not possible," Daniel said slowly. "I've been sending money every month, $3,000, for 5 years. The number hit me like cold water. $3,000 every month for 5 years. I did the math automatically, the way I'd learned to do when counting every dollar at the grocery store. That was $36,000 a year, $180,000 total. We paid $800 a month for our basement. It had one window that looked out at ground level where people's feet walked by. The heating barely worked in winter. The bathroom ceiling had a crack that dripped when the upstairs neighbors showered. "Rebecca?" Marcus said sharply, reaching for my hand across the table. His palm was sweating. "You're confusing them. We can talk about this later." But Daniel was already pulling out his phone, his jaw tight. He swiped through screens with shaking fingers and turned it toward me. Bank statement. Transfer after transfer, all labeled the same way. For Marcus and Rebecca. Housing. $3,000 every single month. The last one dated 3 days ago. "Where is the money, Marcus?" Daniel's voice was quiet, but it cut through the restaurant noise like a blade. "Dad, there's been a misunderstanding. Where is the money?" Marcus's hand tightened around mine, his fingers digging into my knuckles. "This isn't the place to discuss this." "You told me you were living in that apartment," Helen whispered. Her eyes were filling with tears. "You sent us pictures. You said Rebecca loved the kitchen." Pictures. He'd sent them pictures. I felt something cold settle in my chest, something that made it hard to breathe. "What pictures?" I asked. No one answered me. Marcus was staring at his father, and Daniel was staring back with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly. Something worse. Betrayal. "We're leaving," Marcus announced, standing abruptly. He pulled me up by the arm, hard enough that I stumbled. "I'll call you tomorrow, and we'll straighten this out." "Marcus James Thornton, you sit down right now." Helen's voice cracked like a whip. I'd never heard her sound like that. She was always so soft-spoken, so gentle. But Marcus was already guiding me through the restaurant, his hand clamped around my elbow like a vice. I looked back once and saw Helen crying into her napkin while Daniel sat rigid in his chair, still holding his phone like it might have different answers if he looked again. The valet brought our car. Marcus's car, technically. though I'd never thought of it that way before. A 5-year-old sedan with a dent in the passenger door. As we pulled into traffic, I finally found my voice. What pictures did you send them? Not now, Rebecca. Marcus? What the hell is going on? Where's the money? His hands tightened on the steering wheel. I said not now. We drove in silence. I watched the city lights blur past, thinking about every time I'd skipped lunch to save money. Every time I'd walked instead of taking the bus. The time I'd cried in a clinic bathroom because I couldn't afford to fill a prescription. $3,000 a month. When we finally pulled up to our building, a sagging house converted into 3 units, ours being the basement, Marcus turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. You embarrassed me, he said quietly. I stared at him. I embarrassed you? In front of my parents. You made me look like a liar. You are a liar. The words burst out of me. Marcus, where is the money? Why did your father think we lived somewhere else? He slammed his palm against the steering wheel and making me flinch. Because he wouldn't understand. He'd judge how I chose to use it. It's my father's money, Rebecca. Not yours. Mine. We're married. We're supposed to be partners. Partners. He laughed, sharp and bitter. You work part-time at a bookstore for minimum wage. What exactly do you contribute? The words stung more than they should have. I'd taken that job because Marcus said we needed to save money. He'd said his work was unpredictable, that we had to be careful. I'd believed him. I contribute everything I have, I said quietly, which apparently is more than you do, considering you've been stealing from your parents. His head whipped toward me. I didn't steal anything. That money was given to me, for us. And I used it for us. Then where is it? Where's the apartment? Where's any of it? Marcus's jaw worked like he was chewing on his answer. Finally, he shoved open his door. I need some air. Don't wait up. He was gone before I could respond, striding down the sidewalk and disappearing around the corner. I sat alone in the car, watching my breath fog the windows. Inside the basement, everything looked different. The sagging couch we'd gotten from a curb, the card table we used for meals, the space heater I ran constantly because the landlord wouldn't fix the furnace. I'd thought we were struggling together, building something together. But Marcus had money. He'd always had money. And he'd let me live like this anyway. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in our bed, a mattress on the floor because Marcus said bed frames were a waste, and stared at the ceiling, water stains shaped like continents. I'd named them once when I was bored and lonely. That one was Africa. That one was Australia. Marcus didn't come home. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Helen. Please call me when you can. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I stared at the message for a long time. Sorry for what? For her son being a liar? For not realizing sooner? For the 5 years I'd spent eating ramen and wearing thrift store clothes while Marcus... What? What had he been doing with $180,000? I called in sick to work. My manager, Patty, didn't ask questions. She knew about the anniversary dinner. I'd mentioned it yesterday, excited despite myself. Then I did something I'd never done before. I went looking. Marcus had a filing cabinet in the corner of our basement, tucked behind some boxes. It was always locked. He told me it was just old work documents, tax stuff, boring papers. I'd never questioned it. Now, I stood in front of it, jiggling the handle, locked tight. I should have stopped there. Should have waited for Marcus to come home and explain. But I kept thinking about his face in the restaurant, that frozen expression, the way he'd grabbed my arm, the way he'd called me an embarrassment. I found the key in his toolbox, tucked inside a folded rag. My hands shook as I unlocked the cabinet. The first thing I saw was a folder labeled Riverside Property. Inside were printouts, listing photos of a beautiful apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and gleaming hardwood floors. There were notes in Marcus's handwriting. Send Dad pics of kitchen. Mention the view. He'd researched it, planned it, created an entire fake life to show his parents. Underneath were bank statements. An account in Marcus's name only. I'd never seen it before. Never even knew it existed. The deposits were all there. $3,000 every month from Daniel Thornton, like clockwork. But the withdrawals made my vision blur. Wire transfers. Thousands at a time going to something called TradeSmart investment account. I flipped through pages and pages of statements. The transfers went back years. And then I found them. Letters, printed emails, all from someone named Vanessa. Missing you, baby. Can't wait for next weekend. The necklace is gorgeous. You spoil me. I know it's hard keeping the secret, but it'll be worth it when you finally leave her. The dates went back 2 years. 2 years of, I love you, and soon we'll be together, and she doesn't understand you like I do. I sat on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by evidence of a life I knew nothing about. Hotels and cities Marcus had claimed were work trips. Jewelry receipts, jewelry I'd never seen. Restaurant bills from places I'd never been. All paid for with Daniel's money. Money meant for us. For our housing, our future. Marcus had taken every dollar and built a separate life. A life where he was successful and generous, and in love with someone who wasn't me. And I'd been eating ramen in the dark to save on electricity. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my legs to go numb. Long enough for the tears to stop and something else to settle in their place. Something cold and clear. I took my phone out and photographed everything. Every bank statement, every letter, every receipt. My hands were steady now, mechanical. When I heard Marcus's key in the lock 3 days later, I had already moved all the documents back exactly as I'd found them. The filing cabinet was locked again, the key returned to his toolbox. He came down the stairs with flowers. Grocery store flowers, the cheap kind, but he held them out like they were roses. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have left like that. We need to talk to my parents together. Explain that there was just some confusion about... Confusion, I repeated softly. Yeah, they're old. You know how Dad gets mixed up sometimes. We'll just tell them he was thinking of the security deposit or something, and his phone lit up on the counter between us. The screen showed a text preview. Miss you, baby. When are you coming back? The sender name was just a heart emoji. Marcus's eyes flicked to the phone, then to me. For just a second, I saw panic. Then he smiled. Work contact. You know how unprofessional some clients are. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I'd married 5 years ago in a courthouse ceremony because he'd said we should save money for our future. The man who'd held me when I cried about my mother's death and promised we'd get through it together. The man who'd made love to me in this basement and whispered that we were building something real. I didn't see that man anymore. I didn't know if he'd ever really existed. Okay, I said. Okay? He looked relieved. So, you'll back me up with my parents? Sure, Marcus. Whatever you need. He kissed my forehead and told me he'd make dinner. As he moved around our tiny kitchenette, humming to himself, I pulled out my phone. I had 47 photographs saved, evidence of 5 years of lies. And tomorrow, I was going to show them to his parents. I met Daniel and Helen at a cafe 3 blocks from their house. Not their usual place, somewhere Marcus wouldn't think to look for us. Helen had suggested it over the phone, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite name. Anger, maybe. Or fear. They were already seated when I arrived, 2 cups of coffee going cold in front of them. Daniel stood when he saw me, and the formality of the gesture made my throat tight. 5 years of family dinners and holiday visits, and he'd never looked at me quite like this. Like I was fragile. Like I might break. Rebecca. Helen reached for my hand as I sat down. Her fingers were ice cold. Thank you for meeting us. Of course. I set my bag on the floor, feeling the weight of my phone inside. All those photographs, waiting. Daniel cleared his throat. We tried calling Marcus. He won't answer. His voicemail is full. I wasn't surprised. Marcus had been acting strange since I'd agreed to back him up with his parents. Overly cheerful, watching me too closely. This morning, he'd kissed me goodbye 3 times before finally leaving for work. I didn't know where he really went during the day. I was starting to realize I'd never known. Rebecca? Daniel said gently. We need you to be honest with us. Completely honest. Can you do that? I nodded. How long have you been living in that basement? Since we got married. 5 years. Helen made a small sound, pressing her napkin to her mouth. And you didn't know about the money I was sending? Daniel's voice was carefully neutral, but I could hear the strain underneath. No, I had no idea. I pulled out my phone, my hands steadier than I expected, but I found out where it went. I slid the phone across the table, the first photograph already pulled up, a bank statement showing Daniel's $3,000 deposit, and 3 days later, a wire transfer for $2,500 to TradeSmart Investments. Daniel put on his reading glasses. As he scrolled, his face went gray. What is this? He asked. TradeSmart? Some kind of trading account. There are years of transfers. I think, my voice caught. I think he was investing it, or gambling with it. I don't know. Helen leaned over to look, her hand clutching Daniel's shoulder. They scrolled in silence, the cafe noise fading into background static. Then Daniel reached the emails. I watched his face change as he read. Watched the color come back in angry patches on his cheeks. Watched his jaw clench so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Who? He said slowly. Is Vanessa? I don't know. I've never heard of her. The words tasted like ash. But based on the emails, they've been together for at least 2 years. Helen took the phone, reading with shaking hands. When she got to the one where Vanessa thanked Marcus for the diamond bracelet, she made that sound again. A small, wounded noise. He bought her jewelry, she whispered. With our money. While you were... She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. At my discount store jeans and my clearance rack sweater. At my shoes with the worn heels. Rebecca, what have you been living on? I work at Brennan's Books. Part-time. Minimum wage. The shame of it burned in my chest. Marcus always said we needed to be careful with money. He said his income was unpredictable. His income. Daniel's voice was dangerously quiet. What income? He doesn't have a job. The cafe tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. What? He quit his job at Morrison & Associates 3 years ago. They called me looking for a reference for him last year. And when I asked why he'd left, they told me he'd resigned. Said he wanted to pursue his own ventures. Daniel's eyes were hard. I thought his own ventures were going well. He certainly talked like they were. 3 years. Marcus had been pretending to go to work for 3 years. Where does he go? I heard myself ask. Every morning, he gets dressed and leaves. Where does he go? No one had an answer. Helen was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her face. I don't understand. Why would he do this? We would have helped him if he was struggling. We would have... This isn't about struggling, Daniel interrupted. His voice was cold now. Businessman cold. This is about lying. Stealing. This is about our son taking money meant to help his wife and spending it on another woman. He said his wife, with emphasis, looking at me. And something in his expression made my eyes burn. There's more, I said quietly. I took the phone back and scrolled to the hotel receipts. He told me these were work trips, sales conferences, client meetings, Dallas, Chicago, Miami, weekend trips, sometimes 4-day stretches, all booked at nice hotels, all charged to Marcus's secret account funded by Daniel's transfers. I thought he was working, I whispered. I thought we were building towards something. He'd come home and tell me about difficult clients, stressful negotiations. I'd rub his shoulders and tell him how proud I was. The humiliation was choking me. How could I have been so stupid, so blind? Helen reached across the table and gripped my hand. This is not your fault. I should have known. The money didn't make sense. We were always broke, but he'd sometimes come home with expensive takeout or a new watch. He'd say he got a bonus, or a client took him shopping. I believed him. Of course you did, Daniel said roughly. You trusted your husband. That's what you're supposed to do. He's done this before, Helen said suddenly. We both looked at her. She was staring into her coffee cup, her face drawn. Not exactly this, but lying, manipulating. When he was in college, we found out he'd been forging Daniel's signature on checks. Small amounts at first, then larger. We confronted him, and he cried and apologized and said he had a gambling problem. "You never told me this," Daniel said. "Because he went to therapy. He got help. Or so we thought." Helen looked up at me. "We wanted to believe he'd changed. When he met you, when he settled down and got married, we thought that was proof. We thought you'd been good for him." The weight of her words settled on my shoulders. They trusted him because of me. Because they thought I'd somehow fixed him. "I'm sorry," I said. "No." Daniel's voice cracked like a whip. "No, Rebecca, you have nothing to apologize for. My son is a liar and a thief, and you're his victim. Do you understand me? You're a victim." The word hung in the air. Victim. It felt too big, too dramatic. But looking at the evidence spread across my phone, the emails and receipts and lies, I couldn't argue with it. "What are you going to do?" Helen asked me gently. "I don't know." The truth of it was terrifying. I don't have any money. I don't have family nearby. I can't afford a lawyer. "We'll help you," Daniel said immediately. "Whatever you need. A lawyer? A place to stay?" "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. "No, I can't take your money. Not after..." "After what?" "After my son stole from you." "From us?" Daniel leaned forward. "Rebecca, that money was meant for you. For your housing, your security. You have every right to it. Marcus is still your son. Marcus is a liar who needs to face consequences." Daniel's jaw was set. "If you won't let me help you, then let me help myself. I want to press charges." Helen inhaled sharply. "Daniel, he forged documents, Helen. Look at these bank statements. He created that entire fake apartment story to cover his tracks. That's fraud. He's our son. And she's his wife. The wife he promised to love and protect." Daniel looked at me. "I'm going to talk to my lawyer. I'm going to find out what legal options we have. And Rebecca, I want you to think about what you want. Not what Marcus wants, not what's easiest. What do you want?" What did I want? I wanted to go back to 5 years ago and shake myself. I wanted to have asked more questions, demanded more transparency. I wanted to have trusted my instincts when something felt wrong, instead of swallowing my doubts because I was afraid of seeming paranoid. But I couldn't go back. I could only go forward. "I want the truth," I said finally. "I want to know where all the money went. I want to know who Vanessa is. And I swallowed hard. I want to figure out what my life looks like without him." Helen squeezed my hand. "That's a good start, sweetheart." We talked for another hour. Daniel took notes in his precise handwriting, documenting everything I could remember. Helen ordered me a sandwich and wouldn't let me leave until I'd eaten every bite. They felt like parents in that moment. Not in-laws, but actual parents. The kind who protected you. When we finally left the cafe, Daniel hugged me. A real hug, tight and fierce. "You're going to get through this," he said into my hair. "I promise." I wanted to believe him. I got home before Marcus. The basement felt different now, smaller and meaner. I looked at our furniture, our cheap, shabby furniture, and thought about Vanessa's diamond bracelet, about hotel rooms in Miami. When Marcus came home, he was smiling. He kissed my cheek and asked what I wanted for dinner. "I met with your parents today," I said. The smile froze. "What?" "At Rosie's Cafe, we had a long talk." Marcus set down his keys very carefully. "Rebecca, I told you I'd handle them. We were supposed to present a united front." I showed them the bank statements. The color drained from his face. "You went through my files." "I went through your lies." My voice was surprisingly steady. "I know about TradeSmart. I know about Vanessa. I know about all of it." For a long moment, Marcus just stared at me. Then his expression shifted into something I'd never seen before, cold, calculating. "So what?" he said. "What are you going to do about it? Leave me?" He laughed, sharp and bitter. "With what money, Rebecca? You have nothing. No savings, no car, no place to go. You're stuck. Your parents said they'd help me." "My parents?" He stepped closer. "You went crying to my parents and turned them against me. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "What I've done?" The absurdity of it struck me like a slap. "Marcus, You stole from your own parents. You've been cheating on me for 2 years. You let me live in poverty while you spent $180,000 on another woman. That money was mine. It was meant for us. And I used it for us, he was shouting now. For our future. Do you think I wanted to live in this shithole? I was investing, building something. When it paid off, we'd have been set for life. Is that what Vanessa is? An investment? His hand shot out and grabbed my arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what kind of pressure I've been under. My father's expectations, this joke of a life, being married to someone who can barely contribute anything. Let go of me. Or what? His face was inches from mine now. His breath smelled like coffee and rage. You'll call the cops? Tell them what? That your husband hurt your feelings? I looked at his hand on my arm, then into his eyes. And I saw it clearly for the first time. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't ashamed. He was angry that he got caught. I want a divorce, I said. He let go of me like I'd burned him. For a second, he looked genuinely shocked. Then his expression hardened into something ugly. Fine, he spat. But you're not getting a penny. I'll fight you on everything. The prenup, the assets, all of it. By the time my lawyers are done, you'll wish you'd just kept your mouth shut and played the good little wife. We don't have a prenup. He smiled, and it was the cruelest thing I'd ever seen. Are you sure about that? Because I'm pretty sure I have a document with your signature on it. Might be easy to convince a judge that you just forgot about it. The threat hung in the air between us. He would forge documents. He would lie in court. He would do whatever it took to destroy me. Get out, I whispered. This is my apartment. It's a rental. My name is on the lease too. Get out. For a moment, I thought he might refuse, might push this into actual violence. But then he grabbed his keys and his jacket. You're going to regret this, he said from the stairs. You think my parents will choose you over me? I'm their son, Rebecca. Blood. You're just the girl I was stupid enough to marry. Give it a week, and they'll see you for what you really are, a gold digger who tried to steal from their family. The door slammed. I stood in the middle of the basement, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. Then I locked the door, pulled out my phone, and called Daniel. He knows, I said when he answered. He knows I told you everything. And he's threatening to... I'm calling my lawyer right now, Daniel interrupted. Pack a bag, Rebecca. You're not staying there tonight. Where? You're coming here. Helen's already making up the guest room. Daniel, I can't... Yes, you can. Pack a bag. I'm sending a car. He hung up before I could argue. I stood there for a long moment, looking around the basement that had been my home for 5 years. The sagging couch, the water-stained ceiling, the card table. This place had been a prison, I realized. I'd just been too busy surviving to notice the bars. I packed quickly, throwing clothes and toiletries into a duffel bag. As I zipped it closed, I saw the filing cabinet in the corner. Marcus had been in such a hurry to leave, he hadn't taken anything with him. I didn't hesitate. I unlocked the cabinet and pulled out every folder, every statement, every letter. I loaded them into a cardboard box and carried it upstairs. If Marcus wanted a war, I had ammunition. The car Daniel sent was black and expensive, driven by a man in a suit who didn't ask questions. As we pulled away from the basement, I looked back once. The window where I used to watch people's feet walk by was dark. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Daniel and Helen's house was everything the basement wasn't. Warm, spacious, filled with light. Helen met me at the door and pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and safety. Come in, sweetheart. You're safe here. The guest room had a real bed with a white duvet and more pillows than one person could possibly need. Helen showed me where the towels were, where the coffee maker was, how to work the shower. She was nervous, I realized, trying to fill the silence with practical details because the emotional ones were too big to hold. Thank you, I said when she finally ran out of things to show me. For all of this. I don't know how to... You don't have to thank us. She sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside her. I sat. Rebecca, I need you to understand something. What Marcus did is not your fault, not your responsibility to fix. Do you hear me? I nodded, throat tight. And whatever happens next, whatever you decide to do, we support you. You're family to us. That doesn't change just because Marcus turned out to be... She faltered, her eyes filling with tears. God, I don't even know what he is anymore. He's angry, I said quietly. When I told him I knew everything, he said he'd fight me in court. He said he'd make me regret leaving. Helen's mouth pressed into a thin line. He threatened you? Not physically. Well, I touched my arm where Marcus had grabbed me. Mostly just legal threats. He said he'd claim we had a prenup. He said his lawyers would make sure I got nothing. We don't have lawyers. Daniel and I have lawyers. Helen's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. And I promise you, Marcus will not win this fight. Daniel appeared in the doorway, phone still in his hand. Rebecca, I just spoke with Robert Morrison. He's one of the best family law attorneys in the state. He can see us tomorrow at 10. I can't afford... I'm paying, Daniel said, in a tone that allowed no argument. This is non-negotiable. My son stole from you, from us. This is the least we can do. I wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some shred of independence. But the truth was, I was drowning, and they were throwing me a life preserver. Only a fool would refuse it. Okay, I whispered. Thank you. That night, I lay in the guest bed and couldn't sleep. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Marcus. You're making a huge mistake. My parents will get tired of you. Give it a week. Vanessa means nothing. It was just stress relief. You're my wife. Answer me, Rebecca. Answer me. I blocked his number and finally fell into restless dreams about basements and locked filing cabinets. The next morning, Robert Morrison turned out to be a sharp-eyed man in his 60s with silver hair and an office that smelled like old books and expensive coffee. He listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a leather-bound journal. When I finished, he sat back and steepled his fingers. Mrs. Thornton, I'm going to be direct with you. This case is complicated, but it's not impossible. The primary issue is that the money your father-in-law sent was gifted to your husband, not to you jointly. My stomach sank. However, he continued, the fact that your husband explicitly told his parents the money was being used for joint housing creates an interesting angle. He committed fraud by misrepresenting the use of those funds. Additionally, if we can prove he was hiding assets during the marriage, which these bank statements suggest, that creates grounds for a more favorable divorce settlement. What about the prenup he mentioned? I asked. He said he had my signature on one. Morrison's expression darkened. If he produces a prenuptial agreement you don't remember signing, that's forgery. We'd challenge it immediately with a handwriting expert. Judges don't look kindly on forged documents. What are Rebecca's chances? Daniel asked. He was sitting beside me, Helen on my other side. A united front. If we file for divorce based on adultery and financial misconduct, and if Mr. Thornton attempts to fight it, we'll need to prove everything she's told me. The emails, the bank statements, witness testimony about his deception. Morrison looked at me. Are you prepared for that? Court cases can be ugly. He'll likely try to paint you as unstable, gold-digging, anything to discredit you. Let him try, I said. The words surprised me with their firmness. I have proof. I have his parents' support, and I have the truth. Morrison smiled. Then I think we have a strong case. I'll start drafting the divorce petition. In the meantime, I need you to document everything. Every text he sends, every interaction. If he threatens you in any way, we'll add a restraining order to the filing. As we left the office, I felt something shift inside me. For 5 years, I'd been passive, accepting Marcus's explanations, swallowing my doubts, making myself smaller to fit into his version of our life. I was done being small. 2 days later, Marcus was served with divorce papers. He called Daniel's house immediately, demanding to talk to me. Helen, who answered, told him calmly that all communication needed to go through my lawyer. She's my wife! Marcus shouted loud enough that I could hear him from across the room. She's your soon-to-be ex-wife, Helen corrected. And if you don't stop harassing her, we'll file for a restraining order. She hung up. I stared at her. You just hung up on my son? Yes. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. I've spent 32 years making excuses for Marcus. telling myself he was just immature, just going through a phase, just needed more time to grow up. But he's not going to grow up, is he? This is who he is. Daniel put his arm around her. They stood together in their kitchen, looking older than they had a week ago. Grief did that, I thought, especially grief for someone who was still alive. I'm sorry, I said. Stop apologizing, Daniel said gently. You're the one who was wronged here. Over the following weeks, Morrison's team worked fast. They subpoenaed Marcus's bank records, the TradeSmart account, credit card statements. What they found was worse than I'd imagined. Marcus hadn't just been investing Daniel's money. He'd been gambling with it, day trading stocks he didn't understand, buying cryptocurrency at peaks and selling at losses. The TradeSmart account showed a catastrophic history of bad decisions. Of the $180,000 Daniel had sent, Marcus had lost nearly $90,000 in failed trades. The rest had gone to Vanessa, hotels, expensive dinners, a lease on a BMW he'd apparently been keeping in a garage across town, a car I'd never even seen. Morrison presented it all to me in his office, documents spread across the conference table like evidence at a crime scene. Where does this leave me? I asked. In a strong position, Morrison said. Your husband squandered marital assets, committed adultery, and defrauded his parents. The court will not look favorably on any of this. But I don't want his money, I said, or what's left of it. I just want to be free of him. The divorce will accomplish that. But Rebecca, you're entitled to a settlement. You've lost 5 years to this marriage. 5 years you could have been building your own career, your own savings. That has value. I thought about it, about those 5 years in the basement, the ramen dinners and the broken heater and the prescriptions I didn't fill. About working minimum wage at the bookstore because Marcus said we had to be careful. What would a fair settlement be? I asked. Morrison consulted his notes. Given the circumstances, I'd argue for $40,000. It's not half of what he stole. We can't recover what he lost gambling, but it's enough to give you a fresh start. $40,000. It sounded like a fortune. It sounded like freedom. Okay, I said. Let's ask for that. Marcus's response came through his lawyer, a counteroffer of $5,000 and a mutual non-disclosure agreement. He wants to pay you $5,000 to never talk about what he did, Morrison explained. It's insulting. Refuse it, I said. We went back and forth for weeks. Marcus's lawyer would call with a new offer, each one slightly higher, but always attached to that NDA. 10,000? 15? 20? He's scared, Morrison told me. Scared this will get out, damage his reputation. What reputation? I asked. He doesn't even have a job. Exactly. He's probably hoping to reconcile with his parents eventually. Get back on the family payroll. An NDA would prevent you from telling anyone what really happened. So they'd think I was just a bitter ex-wife. Precisely. I thought about it. About taking the money and moving on. About never having to tell this story again. Never having to see the pity in people's eyes. Then I thought about Vanessa. About the next woman Marcus would charm and lie to. About Daniel and Helen, who deserved to know the truth about their son. No NDA, I said. I don't care how much he offers. I won't be silenced about what he did. Morrison smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. The case was scheduled for mediation in 6 weeks. A last attempt to settle before going to court. I tried to prepare myself for seeing Marcus again, but nothing could have really readied me for it. He looked different, thinner. There were shadows under his eyes and stubble on his jaw. When I walked into the mediation room with Morrison, Marcus's gaze locked onto me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Rebecca, he said, just my name, but loaded with something I couldn't quite identify. Regret? Anger? Both? Mr. Thornton, Morrison said coolly, please refrain from addressing my client directly. Marcus's lawyer, a tired-looking woman named Sandra Pierce, gestured for everyone to sit. The mediator, a patient man named Griffin, explained the process. We're here to find a mutually agreeable solution. Mr. Thornton, would you like to start with your position? Marcus leaned forward. My position is that my wife abandoned our marriage over a misunderstanding. I made some poor financial decisions, yes. But nothing that warrants this kind of— Your client committed adultery, Morrison interrupted. And fraud. We have documented evidence of both. My client made mistakes, Sandra said. But Mrs. Thornton is not entitled to funds that were gifted to Mr. Thornton by his parents. Those funds were gifted under false pretenses, Morrison countered. Mr. Thornton explicitly told his parents the money was being used for joint housing. That creates an implied contract. They argued back and forth, legal language flying over my head. I watched Marcus instead. He was staring at the table, jaw clenched, fingers drumming against the wood. Finally, Griffin turned to me. Mrs. Thornton, what outcome would be acceptable to you? I took a breath. I want a divorce. I want it on record that the marriage ended due to Mr. Thornton's adultery and financial misconduct. I want a settlement of $40,000. And I want no non-disclosure agreement. What happened in our marriage is my story to tell if I choose to tell it. Marcus's head snapped up. You want to humiliate me. I want the truth to be available, I corrected. There's a difference. You're vindictive. You're— Mr. Thornton, Griffin said firmly. Please address your comments to me, not to Mrs. Thornton. Marcus sat back, breathing hard. Sandra whispered something to him, and he shook his head violently. They whispered back and forth for a long moment. Finally, Sandra spoke. My client is willing to offer $25,000, no NDA, if Mrs. Thornton agrees to expedite the divorce and waive any future claims. I looked at Morrison. He gave a small shrug that said, Your choice. $25,000. It wasn't the $40,000 I'd asked for, but it was enough. Enough to get my own apartment, buy a used car, maybe take some classes. Enough to start over. I want 30, I said. Marcus made a strangled sound. 30,000. I repeated, looking at him directly for the first time. And you agreed to repay your parents everything you stole from them. Every dollar. That's not part of this negotiation, Sandra started, but Marcus cut her off. The account is empty, Rebecca. There's nothing left to repay them. Then you'll pay them back over time. Get a job. Make payments, but you will pay them back. That's not realistic. Then I'll see you in court. I stood up. And I'll bring every email, every receipt, every piece of evidence of what you did. I'll put it all on the public record. Your choice. Morrison stood with me. We made it halfway to the door before Marcus spoke. Wait. I turned. He looked broken. 30,000, and I'll work out a repayment plan with my parents. But Rebecca— His voice cracked. I loved you. I know you don't believe that now, but I did. I do. The word should have meant something. Should have hurt or healed or something. But they just felt empty. No, you didn't, I said quietly. You loved the idea of me. The wife who didn't ask questions. Who made you feel like a good person. But you never actually loved me. Because if you had, you wouldn't have been able to do what you did. I left before he could respond. The final divorce papers were signed 3 weeks later. $30,000 deposited into a new bank account in my name only. The marriage dissolved on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct, all entered into public record. I was free. But freedom, I was learning, came with its own complications. The apartment I found was small. A studio on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better days, but was clean and safe. One room with a kitchenette, a bathroom with a shower that actually had good water pressure, and a window that looked out onto a tree. A real tree, not just people's feet. I signed the lease with shaking hands. First month, last month, security deposit. The $30,000 was already shrinking, but I didn't care. This was mine. No one could take it away from me. Helen helped me move in, which didn't take long since I barely owned anything. We made a trip to IKEA for basics. A bed frame, a small couch, dishes, towels. Things I'd never had in the basement. This is good, Helen said, surveying the space. This is really good, Rebecca. I thought she might be crying, but when I looked, she was smiling. Thank you, I said for the 1,000th time. For everything. I couldn't have— Yes, you could have, she interrupted gently. You're stronger than you think. but I'm glad we could help. After she left, I sat on my new couch in my empty apartment and felt the silence settle around me. No Marcus, no lies. Just me and the quiet. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt terrifying. I'd spent 5 years existing in survival mode, and now that the crisis was over, I didn't know what came next. Get a better job, obviously. Build a life. But what kind of life? What did I even want? The questions followed me through the following weeks as I settled into routines. I quit the bookstore. Patty understood, gave me a hug, and a gift card to Target. I needed something that paid better anyway. I applied to dozens of jobs. Administrative assistants, receptionists, customer service roles. My resume was thin. Just the bookstore and a few odd jobs from before I married Marcus. I'd gone to college for 2 years before dropping out when my mom got sick. No degree, no special skills, no real experience. The rejections came in steady and demoralizing. Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates. I was sitting in my apartment, reading the latest rejection email, when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Rebecca? This is Andrea Voss. We met at Robert Morrison's office? I remembered her. Morrison's paralegal, efficient and sharp-eyed. Hi, yes. Is everything okay with the case? The case is closed. You're all set. I'm actually calling about something else. She paused. Mr. Morrison mentioned you were looking for work. Are you still searching? My heart jumped. Yes, definitely. We have an opening for a legal assistant. Entry level, mostly filing and administrative work, but there's room to grow if you're interested in the field. It doesn't pay a fortune, but it's steady. $35,000 a year, plus benefits. $35,000. More than I'd ever made in my life. I don't have experience in legal work, I admitted. We can train you. Morrison was impressed with you during your case. Said you were detail-oriented and composed under pressure. That matters more than experience. I wanted to say yes immediately, but something held me back. Can I ask why you're offering this to me? Andrea laughed. Honestly, because Morrison asked me to call you, but also because we need someone, and I'd rather hire someone I know is honest and hardworking than take a chance on a stranger. So what do you say? I said yes. Starting at Morrison's law office was like learning a new language. Legal terminology, filing systems, court procedures. Andrea trained me with patience, and Morrison himself would occasionally stop by my desk to check how I was adjusting. You're doing well, he told me after my first month. Better than our last 3 assistants combined. The work was tedious sometimes. Scanning documents, organizing files, scheduling depositions, but I liked the structure of it, the clear expectations. And I liked being around people who valued truth and justice, even if it was just in family law disputes and estate planning. I made friends with another assistant, Jamie, who took me to lunch and didn't ask invasive questions about my divorce. We talked about normal things, TV shows, weekend plans, the best coffee shops in the neighborhood. Normal. I was building a normal life. But then, 3 months after starting my new job, I got a call from Daniel. Rebecca, I need to tell you something. His voice was strained. Marcus is contesting the repayment agreement. I sank into my desk chair. What do you mean, contesting? He's claiming he never formally agreed to repay me. His lawyer sent a letter saying the mediation agreement only covered your divorce settlement, not any private arrangements between Marcus and me. But he agreed. We were all there. It wasn't in writing, not in the official divorce decree. His lawyer is arguing it was just a verbal promise made under duress. I felt heat rising in my chest. So he's just not going to pay you back? After stealing $180,000? It looks that way. My lawyer says I could sue him separately for fraud, but it would be expensive and time-consuming, and even if I won, Marcus doesn't have assets to seize. He's effectively judgment-proof. What are you going to do? Daniel sighed. I don't know. Helen wants to pursue it on principle, but I'm not sure I have the energy to fight my own son in court. After we hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen without seeing it. Marcus was weaseling out of the one consequence that actually mattered. He'd lost me, sure, but he'd never valued me anyway. The money. His parents' money. That's what he should have had to answer for. You okay? Jamie appeared at my desk with coffee. You look like you want to murder someone. My ex-husband is refusing to repay money he stole from his parents. Jamie whistled. Classy guy, you dodged a bullet there. Yeah. I took the coffee gratefully. I just wish there was something I could do. Daniel and Helen don't deserve this. Can't you sue him or something? Daniel could, but Marcus doesn't have any money left. He gambled most of it away and spent the rest on his mistress. Wow. Jamie shook her head. Seriously, what a piece of work. I tried to focus on work, but I couldn't shake the anger. Marcus was getting away with it, again. Just like he always had. That evening, I did something impulsive. I searched for Vanessa on social media. I'd seen her name in the emails, but had never looked her up. Part of me hadn't wanted to know what she looked like, what Marcus had seen in her that he hadn't seen in me. But now I was curious. I found her easily. Vanessa Reeves, 28, worked in marketing for a tech startup. Her Instagram was public, full of photos from expensive restaurants, beach vacations, designer handbags. Recent photos showed her alone. No more couple shots. On an impulse, I sent her a message. Hi, Vanessa. My name is Rebecca Thornton. I was married to Marcus Thornton until recently. I'm not reaching out to cause problems, but I thought you should know some things about him. If you're willing to talk, I'd appreciate it. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. To my surprise, she responded within an hour. I know who you are. Marcus told me you were separated when we met. I found out after you filed for divorce that he'd lied about that, and about a lot of other things. I'd be willing to talk. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our apartments. I recognized her from her photos. Tall, blonde, beautiful. She looked tired though, and there was a wariness in her eyes that hadn't been in those Instagram posts. I don't know what you want from me, she said as we sat down, but I'm sorry for all of it. I didn't know he was married. He told me he was divorced. When did you find out the truth? When his parents showed up at my apartment after you filed for divorce. His mother called me a homewrecker. She laughed bitterly, which I guess I was, even if I didn't know it. His parents went to see you? Helen did. She found my address somehow, I think from his credit card statements. She came to tell me what kind of man Marcus really was. Vanessa stirred her coffee. She showed me bank records. Told me he'd been stealing from them to pay for our relationship. I had no idea. He always said he had family money, investments. I believed him. He's good at lying, I said quietly. Yeah. She met my eyes. Look, I know you have every reason to hate me. I don't hate you, I interrupted and surprising myself. He lied to both of us. You're as much a victim as I am. Her eyes filled with tears. I ended it the day Helen showed up. Told Marcus I never wanted to see him again. He showed up at my apartment drunk a week later, begging me to take him back. I had to threaten to call the police. A chill ran through me. Did he hurt you? No, but he scared me. He was so angry, saying I'd ruined his life, that I owed him after everything he'd spent on me. She pulled out her phone. I recorded part of it, actually, in case I needed evidence for a restraining order. Can I hear it? She hesitated, then played the audio. Marcus's voice came through, slurred and furious. You think you can just walk away? After the money I spent on you? The trips, the jewelry, That was your choice. Vanessa's voice, scared but firm. My father's money I took for you, for us, and you're just going to throw it away because my bitch wife got in your head? Get out, Marcus. Not until you... The audio cut off. That's when I threatened to call 911, Vanessa explained. He left. I sat back, my mind racing. Marcus had admitted it. Admitted on recording that he'd taken his father's money for Vanessa. Would you be willing to share this recording with Daniel? I asked. Marcus is trying to claim he doesn't owe his parents repayment. This could prove he knowingly defrauded them. Vanessa bit her lip. Would I have to testify or anything? I don't want to see him again. I don't know, but even if you just gave the recording to Daniel's lawyer, it might be enough. She thought about it for a long moment. Okay, send me the contact information. Marcus doesn't deserve to get away with this. We talked for another hour. She told me about the trips Marcus had taken her on, the stories he'd told about his successful consulting business, how he'd proposed to her 2 weeks before I filed for divorce. He proposed? I felt sick. Said he was waiting for his divorce to finalize and then we'd get married. He even showed me a ring. She pulled out her phone again, showing me a photo of a diamond ring, enormous and gaudy. I told him it was too much, too soon. Now I'm glad I did. Found out later he'd bought it on credit and never made a payment. The jewelry store repossessed it. We parted as something like friends. Not close, but connected by our shared experience of Marcus's deception. I called Daniel that night and told him about the recording. She'll send it to Morrison, I said. It's proof Marcus knew he was using your money fraudulently. Rebecca. Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. Thank you. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. You and Helen have done so much for me. This is the least I can do. Morrison filed a civil suit against Marcus 2 weeks later, using Vanessa's recording as evidence. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue the recording was inadmissible, but the judge disagreed. The case was straightforward. Daniel had given Marcus money for a specific purpose. Marcus had used it for something else entirely, and had admitted as much on tape. The judgment was swift. Marcus owed Daniel $150,000, the amount remaining after accounting for what Marcus had already spent and lost. Repayment terms were set at $1,000 per month until the debt was satisfied. Marcus would be paying his father back for the next 12.5 years. I waited for the satisfaction to hit. The sense of justice served. Instead, I just felt tired. Helen called me the day the judgment came through. Thank you, she said, for finding Vanessa, for not giving up. I'm glad I could help. Rebecca? She paused. I know this is probably strange, but would you like to come to dinner this weekend? Just me and Daniel. We miss you. My throat tightened. You miss me? Of course we do. You were part of our family for 5 years. That doesn't just go away because Marcus turned out to be what he is. I went to dinner that Saturday. We didn't talk about Marcus or the lawsuit. Instead, we talked about my job, about Helen's book club, about Daniel's terrible golf game. Normal things. Family things. As I drove home that night, I realized something. I'd lost a husband, but I'd gained parents. Real ones. It wasn't a fair trade, but it was something. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I got a promotion. Legal assistant to junior paralegal, Morrison announced at the monthly staff meeting. Rebecca has shown exceptional dedication and skill. Andrea will be training her on more complex casework. The raise wasn't huge, $5,000 more a year, but it felt monumental. I'd gone from minimum wage at a bookstore to a career with actual growth potential. At 32, I was finally building something. Jamie took me out for celebratory drinks. To your success, she said, raising her glass, and to terrible ex-husbands who make us stronger. I'll drink to that. We were halfway through our second round when Jamie's expression shifted, looking past me toward the door. Don't turn around, but I think your ex just walked in. My stomach dropped. Are you sure? Tall guy, brown hair, looks like he hasn't showered in a week? Yeah, I'm sure. I turned despite her warning. Marcus was at the bar, alone, ordering a drink. He looked exactly like Jamie described. Unkempt, tired, older than his 33 years. He hadn't seen me yet. We can leave, Jamie offered. No. I surprised myself with the firmness in my voice. I'm not running from him. If he sees me, he sees me. We finished our drinks. I felt hyper-aware of Marcus's presence, waiting for the moment he'd turn and spot me, wondering what he'd do, what I'd do, but he never looked our way, just sat hunched over his drink, scrolling through his phone with the posture of someone carrying heavy weight. When we finally left, I felt something unexpected, pity. Marcus had lost everything: his marriage, his parents' trust, his comfortable life. And unlike me, he hadn't built anything to replace it. Work kept me busy through the fall. I was learning to draft legal documents, conduct research, prepare case files. Andrea was a patient teacher, and I soaked up everything she offered. "You're good at this," she told me one afternoon. "Have you thought about going back to school? Getting your paralegal certificate officially?" "I've thought about it," I admitted, "but I never finished my bachelor's degree. I'd have to complete that first, and I can't afford—" "There are programs," Andrea interrupted. "Night classes, online options, financial aid. If you're serious about this career, it's worth exploring." I looked into it that night, found a local community college with a paralegal studies program. The tuition was manageable, especially with financial aid. I could take classes in the evenings and on weekends while still working full-time. It would be hard, exhausting probably, but I'd survived 5 years with Marcus. I could survive anything. I enrolled for the spring semester. Around the same time, I started therapy. Not because something was wrong, but because I wanted to understand what had happened to me. How I'd ended up in such an unbalanced marriage. Why I'd ignored so many red flags. My therapist, Dr. Patel, was a calm woman in her 50s who asked questions I'd never considered. "What did you learn about relationships from your parents?" she asked during our third session. I thought about my mom, who'd raised me alone after my dad left when I was 3. That you make it work, that you don't give up, even when things are hard. And what did making it work look like for your mother? She worked 2 jobs, took care of me, never dated, never complained. I paused. She was always tired. Did you see yourself following that pattern? The question hit like cold water. Yes. I thought that's what you did. You worked hard, you sacrificed, you made the best of things. Sacrifice can be admirable, Dr. Patel said gently. But there's a difference between working hard for a shared goal and sacrificing yourself for someone who doesn't value you. I cried in her office that day. Not sad tears exactly, more like release. Thanksgiving came. Helen and Daniel invited me to their house. I hesitated. Would Marcus be there? "He's not invited," Helen said firmly when I called to ask. "And even if he showed up, we'd send him away. Your family, Rebecca. He's our son. But he needs to take accountability before we can have him in our lives again." Thanksgiving at their house was warm and full of people I'd never met. Daniel's sister and her family, Helen's college friend, a couple from their neighborhood. Everyone was kind, and no one asked invasive questions about my divorce. I helped Helen in the kitchen, learning her recipe for cranberry sauce. "You seem happy," she said, watching me stir. "I am," I realized. "For the first time in years, I actually am." "Good." She squeezed my shoulder. "You deserve it." Winter came, and with it, my first semester of classes. Business law, legal research, ethics. I studied late into the night, fueled by coffee and determination. It was exhausting. There were moments when I wanted to quit, when the workload felt impossible on top of my full-time job. But then I'd remember the basement, the water stains on the ceiling, the feeling of being trapped. I never wanted to feel that powerless again. My classes became my social life. I made study buddies. Lisa, a divorced mom of 2. Tom, a retired police officer changing careers. Yuki, fresh out of a high school and determined to prove her parents wrong about college. We formed a group chat, shared notes, commiserated about difficult professors. It felt good to be part of something, to have people who understood the struggle. One Saturday in February, I was studying at a coffee shop when someone sat down across from me. Marcus. My heart jumped. I hadn't seen him since that night at the bar. He looked worse now, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and clothes that hung loose on his frame. "Rebecca," he said, "can we talk?" "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please, just 5 minutes." I glanced around. The coffee shop was busy. Other people nearby. Safe. "Fine, 5 minutes." He rubbed his face. "I've been trying to get my life together. Got a job delivering packages, living with a roommate, making my payments to my dad. Okay, I wanted to apologize for everything, for lying to you, for wasting your time, his voice cracked, for being such a coward. I waited. There had to be more. There was always more with Marcus. My therapist says I have narcissistic tendencies, he continued, that I built this fantasy life because I couldn't handle feeling like a failure. And you were collateral damage. Yes, I said, I was. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did. I see it clearly now. And I'm sorry. He looked sincere, broken even. A year ago, I would have softened, would have offered comfort, reassurance. Now, I just felt neutral. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully, but I need you to understand something. What you did to me damaged me in ways I'm still unpacking. I spent 5 years making myself smaller, quieter, less, believing I wasn't worth more than a basement apartment and ramen dinners. It's taken me months of therapy to even begin to rebuild my self-worth. I know, I'm not finished. My voice was steady. I hope you're getting help. I hope you make better choices. But I can't be part of your redemption story, Marcus. I can't be the person who forgives you so you can feel better about yourself. You need to do that work on your own. He nodded slowly. Okay, I understand. Good luck with everything, I said, and I meant it. Not for his sake, but for the sake of whoever he might hurt next if he didn't change. He left without looking back. I sat there for a long moment, waiting for emotions to hit. Anger, sadness, something. Instead, I just felt free. I texted Dr. Patel. Marcus apologized to me today. I didn't forgive him, and I feel okay about it. She responded immediately. That's growth. Proud of you. Spring semester ended with strong grades. I'd earned an A in business law and A- in my other courses. Morrison gave me another small raise and more responsibilities. I was managing my own case files now. Small stuff. Mostly uncontested divorces and simple estates. But it was mine. I moved to a bigger apartment in May. 1 bedroom instead of a studio with a real kitchen and a balcony where I could drink my morning coffee. I bought furniture I actually liked instead of whatever was cheapest. I hung art on the walls, framed photos of Helen and Daniel, of my study group, of the tree outside my old apartment window. Evidence of my life, my people, my progress. Jamie helped me move, along with Tom from my study group and a guy named Alex who worked in Morrison's accounting department. Alex and I had been friendly for months, sharing lunch breaks, chatting about our weekends. He was kind and funny, with an easy smile that didn't set off the many alarm bells. After everyone left, he lingered. Your new place looks great, he said. Thanks, it's still pretty empty, but I'm working on it. Listen, I know you've been through a lot with your divorce and everything, but I was wondering, he rubbed the back of his neck. Would you want to get dinner sometime? Like a date? My first instinct was to say no. I wasn't ready. I needed more time. But then I thought about it, really thought about it. Was I actually not ready? Or was I just scared? I'd like that, I said. His smile lit up his whole face. Yeah, great. How about Friday? We went to a casual Italian place. Nothing fancy, but the food was good and the conversation was easy. Alex told me about his family, his college years, his dreams of starting his own accounting firm someday. He asked about me, and I found myself talking about things I hadn't told many people. My mom, her death, how I dropped out of college to care for her, my dreams of becoming a paralegal, maybe even a lawyer someday. You'll get there, Alex said with certainty. You're one of the most determined people I've ever met. It wasn't a grand declaration, just a simple observation. But it meant more to me than any of Marcus's empty promises ever had. We dated casually through the summer. Nothing serious, nothing rushed. Just dinners and movies and long walks through the park. Alex was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. In August, Daniel called with unexpected news. Marcus got engaged, he said. I processed this. To Vanessa? No, someone new. A woman he met at work, apparently. Melissa something. How do you feel about it? Honestly? Worried for her. But Helen reached out, warned her about Marcus's history. She seemed unreceptive. Said people deserve second chances. They do, I said. But second chances only work if someone actually changes. Agreed. Daniel paused. How are you doing with it? I'm okay, I realized. Actually, I'm more than okay. I'm happy for myself for where I am now. Good. That's really good, Rebecca. After we hung up, I thought about Marcus and his new fiancée. Wondered if he'd really changed or if he was just repeating old patterns with a new victim. But it wasn't my problem to solve. I had my own life to live. 2 years after my divorce, I graduated from my paralegal program. Helen and Daniel came to the ceremony, along with Alex, Jamie, and my entire study group. It was a small community college graduation, nothing grand, but when they called my name and I walked across that stage, I felt like I'd won something bigger than a diploma. I'd won myself back. Morrison gave me another promotion, senior paralegal working on complex cases. The salary jump meant I could finally stop living paycheck to paycheck. I started saving, planning for the future. Alex and I moved in together that fall. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. He'd been patient through my healing process, never pushing, always supporting. He'd earned my trust slowly, day by day. You sure about this? He asked as we unpacked boxes in our shared apartment. Living with someone again? I'm sure. And I was. This was different from Marcus. This was built on honesty, respect, partnership. Helen taught me to cook that year. Real cooking, not just pasta and sauce. We spent Sunday afternoons in her kitchen. Her showing me how to make pot roast, homemade bread, her mother's apple pie recipe. Your family, she said one afternoon, flour dusting her hands. You know that, right? I know. Even if you and Alex get married someday, even if you have your own children, you'll always be our daughter. Not daughter-in-law. Daughter. I hugged her, getting flour all over both of us. Daniel taught me about investing, helping me set up a retirement account. You lost 5 years of savings because of Marcus, he said. Let's make sure your future is secure. They asked for nothing in return. No guilt trips, no manipulation, just pure, unconditional support. This was what family was supposed to feel like. I saw Marcus one last time, 3 years after our divorce. I was having lunch with a client near the courthouse when I spotted him across the street. He was with a woman, not the Melissa he'd gotten engaged to, someone else. They were arguing, her gesturing angrily while he stood with his arms crossed. Some things never changed. He looked up and saw me. For a moment, our eyes met across the busy street. I raised my hand in a brief wave. Not friendly, not hostile, just acknowledgement. He didn't wave back, just turned and walked away. The woman following him, still arguing. I went back to my lunch, to my client's questions about her estate planning. Marcus was a chapter in my life, but he wasn't the whole story. I was writing new chapters now. Alex proposed on a random Tuesday. No grand gesture, no elaborate plan. We were making dinner together, and he just stopped chopping vegetables and said, I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me? The ring was modest. He knew I didn't care about expensive things. What mattered was the question and the man asking it. Yes, I said. We got married at a small ceremony 6 months later. Helen and Daniel walked me down the aisle together. My study group came. Half of Morrison's office came. Jamie was my maid of honor. It was nothing like my first wedding. That rushed courthouse ceremony with Marcus. This was real. This was built on truth. During the reception, Helen pulled me aside. I'm so proud of you, she said. Look at everything you've built, Osh, your career, your education, this marriage. You did all of that yourself. Not by myself, when I corrected. You and Daniel helped me. We gave you a hand up when you needed it, but you did the climbing. I thought about that later, dancing with Alex while our friends celebrated around us. She was right. Yes, I'd had help, but I'd made the choices. I'd done the work. I'd saved myself. 4 years after my divorce, I enrolled in law school. It was ambitious, maybe crazy, I'd be juggling classes with my full-time job and my marriage. But Morrison encouraged it, offering flexible hours. Alex supported it completely. "You've wanted this for years," he said. "Go get it." So I did. Law school was brutal. Harder than anything I'd ever done. There were moments I wanted to quit, moments I felt like I was drowning. But I'd survived worse. I studied late into the night, wrote papers during my lunch breaks, attended weekend study sessions. Alex picked up the slack at home, cooking dinners and doing laundry without complaint. "We're partners," he said when I tried to thank him. "This is what partners do." Partners. The word Marcus had thrown at me dismissively years ago. Alex made it mean something real. I graduated from law school 3 years later, at 38 years old. Helen and Daniel threw me a party. Morrison offered me a position as an associate attorney at the firm. I passed the bar exam on my first try. Everything I'd built, every sacrifice I'd made, every late night and early morning, it all led to this. I was a lawyer. One afternoon, 5 years after my divorce, I was working on a case when Andrea knocked on my office door. "You have a walk-in asking for you," she said. Wouldn't give her name, but she said it's urgent. I followed Andrea to the conference room. The woman waiting there was young, maybe 25, with nervous hands and red-rimmed eyes. "I'm Rebecca Carter," I said, using my maiden name professionally. "How can I help you?" "My name is Melissa Porter," she said. "I think you used to be married to my husband, Marcus Thornton." My stomach clenched. "I was. A long time ago. I need a divorce lawyer." Her voice cracked. "And someone told me you'd understand." I sat down across from her. "Tell me what's happening." Her story spilled out. The lies, the financial manipulation, the secret accounts. A different woman this time. Not Vanessa, someone new. Money taken from Melissa's savings account. Promises broken. The same patterns. The same Marcus. "I feel so stupid," she whispered. "His parents tried to warn me, but I thought they were just bitter about his first marriage. I thought he'd changed." "You're not stupid," I said firmly. "He's a skilled manipulator." I believed him too. "But you got out. How?" "Everyone says you walked away with nothing and built all this." She gestured around my office. I thought about how to answer that. About the basement and the filing cabinet and the night I finally chose myself. I stopped believing his version of events and started trusting my own reality, I said. And I accepted help from people who actually cared about me. "Will you help me?" I looked at her. This woman Marcus had lied to. Just like he'd lied to me. Just like he'd probably lied to the next one and the next one. Someone had to stop the cycle. "Yes," I said. "I'll help you." I took Melissa's case pro bono. Helped her document everything. File for divorce. Fight for what she deserved. Morrison supported it, even though it meant working extra hours for free. "Some cases are about more than money," he said. Melissa's divorce was finalized 6 months later. She walked away with a fair settlement and an order for Marcus to repay money he'd taken from her savings. He'd never learn, but at least we could limit the damage he caused. Melissa sent me a card afterward. "Thank you for believing me. Thank you for showing me what's possible." I put it on my desk next to my law degree. 7 years after my divorce, Alex and I had a daughter. We named her Emma. Holding her in the hospital, I thought about everything I'd survived to get to this moment. The lies, the poverty, the fear. The slow, painful work of rebuilding. If I hadn't left Marcus, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have this life, this career, this family. The pain had been worth it. Helen and Daniel came to meet their granddaughter. Not by blood, but by choice. They'd cut Marcus out of their lives completely 3 years ago, after he'd failed to make payments and started threatening legal action for his rightful inheritance. "She's perfect," Helen whispered, holding Emma with tears streaming down her face. "She is," I agreed. I took Emma home to our house, a real house with a yard and good schools nearby. Alex had painted the nursery yellow, filled it with books and soft blankets. This was what I'd been building toward, not just a career or financial stability, a life. One night, when Emma was sleeping and Alex was dozing on the couch, I stood at the window looking out at our quiet street. I thought about 27-year-old Rebecca, standing in that basement, wondering if this was all her life would ever be. I wished I could tell her, it gets better. You get stronger. You survive. And more than survive, you thrive. 10 years after my divorce, I made partner at Morrison's firm. The nameplate on the door read, Rebecca Carter, partner. I ran my fingers over the letters, feeling the weight of what they represented. Daniel and Helen threw a celebration dinner. Alex made a speech about how proud he was. Jamie flew in from Seattle, where she'd moved for her own career. And somewhere in the city, Marcus was living whatever life he'd built, or failed to build. I didn't know. I didn't care. He was a ghost from another lifetime. That night, after everyone had gone home and Emma was asleep, I sat in my home office and pulled up an old file on my computer. Photographs I'd taken 7 years ago, bank statements, love letters, hotel receipts. Evidence of Marcus's lies that I'd kept, just in case. I'd never needed them again after the divorce, but I'd kept them anyway. A reminder of where I'd been. I looked at them for a long moment, then I selected them all and hit delete. Are you sure you want to permanently delete these files? I clicked yes. The progress bar filled. The files disappeared. I closed my laptop and went to bed, where Alex was already sleeping. I curled up next to him, his arm automatically wrapping around me even in sleep. This was my life now. Not the one Marcus had tried to trap me in, but the one I'd built from nothing. And I'd done it by making one choice. Over and over again, choosing myself. The basement was gone. The fear was gone. The girl who believed she deserved so little was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth. And that made all the difference.